Good afternoon, colleagues, and welcome to this panel discussion on what will the university look like in 2030. My name is James Clay. I'm the Head of Higher Education and the Student Experience at Jisc, and we've got a great panel here today to talk about this subject. They're going to introduce themselves because I'm terrible at remembering people's names. The future. It's quite hard to predict the future. You know, I was reflecting on this for this session, and I looked back in time at my own predictions of the future. And I remember when I was predicting the future, I did start with a caveat, which I say again today, which is, I don't know the future for sure, and I also know that no one can really predict the future. So anything goes as far as I'm concerned on this one. However, back then, which wasn't that long ago, was 11 years ago actually, I said to myself, and I said to the people I was writing for in this blog post, that the next big thing was going to be e-books and e-book readers. I anticipated that this was going to be something that would move away from a kind of elite, kind of quirky thing to something that would become quite mainstream. And I know you're not a mainstream audience in many ways, but how many people here have read an e-book? Put your hand up. So you know what they are. By the way, does anyone have a Microsoft Courier? Yeah, that was Microsoft's e-book reader things. 2030. For some of us, that feels like a long time in the future, but it is actually only 11 years. It's not that far to go. But if we go, one way I always think about predicting the future is to actually look at the past and see how things have changed over the last 11 years. So I want to take you back to 2008. 2008. At that time, the iPhone was it was a newfangled device. It'd been out less than a year. It even had 3G connectivity. The iPad was still a secret, more of an open secret at Cupertino. Surgeons at London's Moorfields Eye Hospital had done the first successful operation of bionic eyes. That was 11 years ago. The other thing that happened 11 years ago, someone registered the domain bitcoin.org. How things have changed. So what we want to do in this panel discussion is just reflect on what we think will happen in 11 years' time, what the implications are for universities and colleges, and what does that mean for both the student experience but also the technical infrastructure that's going to enable that student experience. So we've got a great panel ahead, and we're going to start off with Sue. So, Sue, over to you.
Okay. I'm Sue Beckham from Sheffield Hallam University. I'm coming from a learning and teaching perspective, so I teach and I have a learning and teaching lead role in the faculty. My vision of the future of the student experience is to have a virtual learning hub that is interconnected, rather than these disparate things that we try to connect and they don't. And an intelligent app, and that all students are provided with what I describe as an intelligent device that's preloaded with activities, active learning apps, things that we might relate to in today's learning and teaching, Socrative, Padlet, whatever they are in the future, that allow active learning inside and outside of the classroom, collaborative and otherwise. And the students would have a profile preloaded, but they can personalise that, they can put in their interests, that will be searchable, so it would connect to the students, so they could find things that they connected with, personally. It would have a profile of their achievements, their marks and feedback and attendance, that sort of thing. It would enable chat and connect them automatically to their academic advisor, their tutor, careers if they wanted to, student support, well-being, all those sorts of things. It would connect to a learning workspace, personal and collaborative, so they could actually get to that. So we're using Google Docs at our university, or Google Drive, the various different things in there. That would be part of the device, as well as whatever the virtual learning environment looks like in that time. It would link to extracurricular apps, so the students know what kind of things are available outside of their taught courses. They'd be able to easily access peer chats or video chats in groups or individually, so things that they're using like WhatsApp, it would be part of this app. But there's also things like maps and wayfinding that would take them to their timetable, library, learning, social spaces and that sort of thing. Now I see that we would use a flexible classroom space, so rather than it being typically labs or just tables and chairs, that they could take their device in with them, because every student would have one of these. They'd be charged on charging mats on the table. They would be able to connect their device to a larger screen. So if they wanted to work in 2s or 3s or 6s or 10s, there would be that, they could pull that forward, whether it's at the side of the classrooms or wherever it's kept. Potentially interactive walls. So they would be across either as screens or physically on the walls, and you could actually plug your device, or it would actually sync rather than plugging, because we're getting away from the plug-in. It would actually sync, so they could, whatever work they do, it would connect back to it. Things like Siri or Alexa, they could call upon that from their device to get extra information, maybe even learning nuggets, so revision on topics, they could get that from their device. And it would also allow virtual video meetings, so we could connect globally to other students in other parts of the world, or even other businesses or people that they wanted to have meetings with. And they would come with subtitles and translation for our international students, and the option to record those. The device would also allow for feedback. They could record that using multimedia. It could be tagged by module, personal keywords for the students. And if it was formative, it would go into their own personal space. If it was summative, the tutors would ask them to use that device to capture that feedback, and that would go to the central space, the BLE, or whatever that looks like. That's my vision.
Thank you, Sue. Next, we have Marc. Marc.
Hello, everyone. Marc OLeary. I'm with Jisc, Head of Network Access. I think I've inveigled my way onto this panel more as an expert in mobility technologies than someone with a vision of the student experience. So I'll start at least by talking about that. And I think the crystal ball is fairly clear from that point of view, because the human body isn't changing shape on these timescales. So phones are still going to be about the size of your hand, and their interfaces are still going to have control surfaces that are about the size of your fingertip. Watches will still go around people's wrists. So I think the actual form factor of the devices these future students will be using will be very familiar to us today, a bit thinner, a bit slicker, maybe longer battery life, but still very recognizable to us as we are. They'll presumably have much greater capabilities, but I think we've long seen a trend that every increase in capability of device is matched by an increase in the demands of the software running on it, without actually that huge a change in the user experience that derives from that. So Word was presumably running on Windows 3.11 and is out there on macOS and iOS now, but still feels pretty much like the original vision of a virtualized version of a typewriter. So my future for mobile devices is not much change. My future for the mobile networks that they connect to starts with the sort of Scotty observation of you can't change the laws of physics, Jim. So we're limited by spectrum, what's available. I think the demand will be for those networks to be more pervasive and higher capacity, and that drives us towards higher frequencies in the radio and microwave space, which makes for shorter ranges and lower penetration within buildings. So we're going to see lots and lots of the future equivalent of access points distributed around our buildings and being managed in a highly complex network. We have mentioned, my colleague here, of a flexible classroom. I remember quite a few years ago now, some excitement in a network shop presentation where a lorry that was converted to an IT training classroom was making a splash by A, visiting the workers at travelling fairs and giving them access to education when they wouldn't necessarily be willing to move away from the fairgrounds, and something that actually served as a visitor attraction, a gaming suite, would then become a classroom at 1, 2 in the morning for the carnies to actually undertake some adult education. And a similar facility, without the gaming side of it, was also a community outreach for a community of Muslim women who traditionally stayed with the household or at the mosque and wouldn't travel outside to attend education. And this new facility of a lorry with a satellite dish on the roof was a fantastic new opening into the world of access to education. And I think it's ironic, and a question I don't know the answer to, whether our increasing technical capabilities will allow all of our collateral to be real-time translated and for us to address more and more granular communities in their own languages, in their own cultural traditions, or the fact that that goes hand in hand with global communication and this sort of leveling factor that every village in the veldt or the Amazonian jungle has people wearing Coca-Cola t-shirts and kicking around Man United footballs. So I don't know if future technologies and viewed through education mean that our educational routes of access are going to be more and more diverse to solve multiple communities, or whether there's going to be this great levelling and there'll be just the one route in. So that's what I don't know, but the mobility part is kind of going to be familiar, I think. So those are my 2 takes on that.
Thank you, Mark. We now have Kalyn.
Hi guys, so I'm Kalyn, I'm a sector analyst here at Jisc. I've got a slightly different perspective on this, and I think that's the use of the digital versus the analog. So I think it's very easy to get very excited about all the awesome stuff that the digital is going to do. You know, I expect AI to be very much part of our day-to-day worlds. I expect things like super fast Wi-Fi that almost we forget that Wi-Fi is a thing and it just kind of does it. Things like AR and VR will be prevalent in every classroom and every learning environment. But what I think we need to think about potentially a little bit more is the human capability that goes along with that, and how the human network overlays the infrastructure to get the most out of both. So Hannah Fry was talking yesterday about how humans are really good at being sensitive and AI is really good at being specific. And I think we need to find a way to harness that power for the best outcome for everybody. And I see that as more inclusive learning environments that are more diverse in terms of location or spaces, but I would never want to lose things like you have the opportunity to go see the Grand Canyon. Because we can do it in VR, that it gives the option to more people, but there's something special about being there. And I think it's using the technology to enable us to take the decision of, do I want to go there in person or do I want to experience it in VR? And there could be very good reasons for both. And for me, that optionality that this digital versus analog or digital with analog is going to give us is really exciting, because it means we can have those conversations face to face and those experiences with people in real environments that we want to have, but it also gives us the optionality of pulling people together in the virtual world because it's quicker, or because we want that many people together that physically locating together is a bit of a nightmare. But we can then experience things for people who wouldn't get to experience them otherwise. So for me, it's a real mesh of how those two can fit together and how we can get the best out of those for a diverse range of learners in a diverse range of learning environments.
Thank you, Kalyn. Now, before we go to Jake, just a reminder that we do have the VVox question app running. So if you've got questions for the panel members or general comments to make, please use the VVox app. We will also allow you to put something like your hands up and talk later, but we're just going to go through the rest of the panel. Jake, over to you.
Thank you. I'm Jake Forecast, and I'm a primary education undergraduate at Canterbury Christ Church University, and I'm also a Jisc student partner. I came to the Jisc student partner in June 2018 with a vision, and that vision was to promote technological inclusivity. What I find inclusivity, and this is what Temporo in 2018 stated, that inclusion is a complex issue. And it's more to what we actually expect. It's not just the special educational needs and disabilities, it's more about meeting the greater depth of everybody's needs to ensure that they are inclusive in the classroom. And this is why the Jisc Horizon report concluded that the technologies that were selected were considered, but were not inclusive technologies for the needs of the members of society. So have we not identified to adapt every need or to actually identify inclusion before we've actually carried out technologies? To gather further understanding of society's needs, we need to strip that back to a child's learning and development. Now, for a while, our education has had a traditional educational ideology, whereby the teacher is delivering and the student is listening. This is not an effective approach. I believe, and I'm sure that you guys believe too, that education needs to be more of a progressive approach, where students are more creative and more based on their learning. As I've seen throughout the last 2 days at the network shop, I've seen Natalie 4.0, which is a new education, what we could be seeing. What we could be predicted by is the use of virtual reality and better learning environments. I've also seen, if you ever get to see it, go and see Sticky Campus. They have many varieties of ways that we can use the learning environments within our classrooms. But how does this link to the issues that we may face in universities in 2030? Well, the National Student Survey assessments revealed that normally it is the lowest in their category. And does that mean we're not suiting the needs for all students on their courses? So, for example, students in our schools and students in and teachers in our lectures state that we need to be more creative within our learning, but they are teaching from a PowerPoint, which means it is traditional. So does that mean that they need to have the training in order for students to be inclusive in their environments as well as the teachers? To conclude this, us as educators, employees and organisations should ensure that we all should have access to education by having high quality learning spaces and pedagogies that enable students to thrive, to understand their realities and work for more than just society. Is to ensure that their individual needs, including the use of digital technologies, is effective. And by this, 2030 will become the year of technological inclusivity.
Thank you. And now we go over to Amber.
I'm the Head of Academic Technology at the University of Warwick. So how might the university change? Does what we teach and how we teach meet the needs of learners, of employers, of society? And might we need to offer many more types of learning opportunity? Some of us might soon be competing with monthly subscription apps for MBAs. They exist. What are the barriers to us developing pay-as-you-go education? Can we? Should we? The business model for supplying learning opportunities might need to change, and that means the way that we're funded as well. The unbundled university will challenge how we cost and supply courses, and that has implications for us in IT services about how we deliver our services and how we pay for them and model them as well. There are also strong drivers for more diversity in our student body, in our partnerships with employers as well. And IT should meet that challenge and aim to bring in those perspectives from a broader workforce. I would hope that we will see a growth in more public scholarship, more public and open academic work, the idea of the inside-out university. And that means thinking about intellectual property, content analytics, digital rights management. But there is also a desire to open the doors on our teaching to enable wider participation of the public, alumni, professional practitioners, of guest speakers, allowing the outside in. But that can be challenging. This can mean thinking differently about how we give people access to our digital spaces and to our physical spaces, and being able to be more agile in that wider participation. So this demand for the porosity of the public university is quite at odds with the needs that we have to manage access tightly, to manage data securely, to be able to track activity. So there's a tension there. Will we get more online courses? Yes. Will they replace face-to-face courses? Sometimes. We know that younger people are less likely to see online as a second-rate experience. They're at home in a blended world and they value the convenience of online. They still expect tutor interaction and peer support. So this is a lot more than broadcasting content. This isn't about YouTube. This is about meaningful online experiences. And that all has implications for academic work, academic contracts, and for IT support expectations. Maybe we're seeing the end of office hours already. What does that mean for us? But I imagine that face-to-face will continue to be the premium time. Summer schools, tutorials, social learning, field trips, for those that can afford it. A word about lectures. I've lost count of how many times people have spoken at conferences, tech conferences, in front of large audiences, telling them that the lecture is dead. It's the end of the lecture. The irony in that is noticeable, because the model of large audience and one speaker at the front persists because it is actually quite an efficient use of space and time. It has its place. And there's also a lot to be said for the social side of large lectures, of being together. But perhaps we'll see a lot more lecture streaming, remote groups watching them, so lectures with being together online as well. Chatbots, yes, more voice assistants, more immersive learning experiences, more VR and AR, all of that. But I wonder if there might also be a demand for being off-grid, spaces to unplug from the network, whether alone or together, for reasons of well-being or for concentration. We might see a growth in those sorts of models and those demands. So 2030, different models of education, tensions between open and closed, and perhaps an evolution from ubiquitous connectivity to personalised connectivity.
Thank you, Amber. And Andy?
Yeah. Hi everyone, I'm Andy Powell. I'm Cloud CTO at Jisc. I went to university in 1979, and that makes me old enough to be a grumpy old man. So I'm going to talk a little bit about being a grumpy old man. In 1979, the Falklands War, the poll tax and the miners' strike were still gleams in Margaret Thatcher's eyes. I remember going to the student union and the most commonly worn badge was, "Don't blame me, I didn't vote for her." This is all just a bit of a history lesson, by the way. Mobile phones didn't exist. Janet didn't exist. Actually, I'm sure someone's going to correct me on that, but to all intents and purposes, Janet didn't exist. There was no inter-university connectivity in any real sense. Our student TV sets were black and white. Colour TV was around, but black and white TV licenses were a lot cheaper, so that's what we went with. I could go on. My daughter went to university in 2010. She actually went to Sheffield Hallam. So about 30 years later, the world around us had completely changed, but actually I'd argue there was probably very little difference, or more similarities than differences in our student experiences, despite that 30 years and everything that had gone on around that. We both studied for 3 years. We both had long summer breaks. We both sat for a significant amount of time in lecture theatres. I didn't have PowerPoint slides because PowerPoint didn't exist in those days, but the delivery mechanism was exactly the same. We both went to university, at least in part, just for the experience of going to university and getting away from home, and for the fact that it offered a stepping stone to a job, i.e. it offered a bit of paper at the end of the 3 years. There were differences, and the most obvious one of those was the way we got funded. So I actually got 2 grants for various reasons, which I won't go into here. That's the amazing thing. You could get 2 grants in those days. My daughter got a student loan, and she's still paying it back. There was probably more focus on soft skills when my daughter went to university, more project work and probably more group project work in particular. That was partly to do with the courses we did, but I think it was probably generally true. She spent a lot more time in the library than I did, but it probably wasn't called a library then. It was probably called a student learning centre or something. She submitted most of her work electronically. I'm not sure about the her final project work. I've got a feeling that still had to be on paper, but obviously I had to hand in all mine on paper. I think the major technological differences came from outside the university, Facebook being the biggest obvious one in the case of my daughter, versus nothing when I was at university. And I think there were big changes in sort of attitudes and expectations, particularly expectations of women when my daughter went to university, far different from 30 years before, I would say. Sorry, that's a long way of saying the cynic in me is tempted to say that in 2030, which is, I've written down is 12 years away, which tells you something about my maths, 11 years away, I would be tempted to say student experience in universities will not be greatly different than they are today. Sorry, I'm sure there's colleagues in Jisc who are like throwing up their hands at this point, but I think there's every chance that that will be the case. I think we will see move towards much better use of data to make data-driven decision-making. I think we will see that. I think we'll see some move to what we're currently calling the intelligent campus, but in reality, I don't know how far we'll really get on that road. I'm not sure we'll see true, what I would call true digital transformation of the student experience. Maybe we will, maybe we won't, I don't know. I'm feeling cynical, you can tell. I think, I gave a talk this morning where I talked about the modern institution, and I think we will not get as far towards that as we perhaps should do. And I think that's partly because of there will be a continuing reluctance on the part of universities to adopt public cloud and all that public cloud can offer us in the same way that is happening in other sectors. Partly that's down to lack of true market forces, I think, and that may change in the intervening years, but I think we will see some pressures coming from outside the university space, outside the sector, that will influence the way universities go. So, for example, government attitudes to apprenticeships versus degrees, the extent to which employers value degrees as things. We no longer ask for our technical staff to have a degree. We used to mandate it. 3 or 4 years ago, we would always mandate you must have a degree. We don't do that anymore. It's not, we don't turn people down because they have a degree, obviously, but we don't mandate that they have a degree. And also the extent to which going to university remains a kind of expected part of growing up, I think will be much more fundamental to the way universities develop than anything else. But I don't know what effect these things will have on the shape of universities in 2030. But I would say, I think the major technological innovations around learning are going to come from outside universities, not from inside the sector. That would be my view.
Thank you. And finally, we have Simon.
Thank you very much. Before I start, I'd like to say thank you all for your time this afternoon. A couple of comments first. Strangely, I agree with most of what's been said already along the panel, including, apologies if you don't know, the grumpy man at the end who said that we would be a bit slow doing this. I'm absurd. 10 years is a lifetime in technology. If you look at where we were 10 years ago with the things we used to use, the way we accessed information, the way we communicated and shared thoughts and visions with other people, it was wildly different to the way we do it today. Yeah, 10 years ago, the iPad didn't exist. I remember it came out in 2010. These things have changed dramatically, and I agree that the change in the way people are educated has not been quite so nearly dramatic as that. My son is at university right now, and his experience mirrors a lot of what I hear from the people I work with who've been in work for 10, 20, 30 years, is that the process and the pattern is the same. Maybe the tools are slightly different, but the way is exactly the same. So to think about where universities could be and perhaps should be in 10 years' time, we also, I think, have to look at the trajectory of where the students of today, and indeed the primary school students of today, are, and what their experience is and what the things they're used to, and what they will come to expect when they hit the university age, because it's a significant commitment in terms of time and money. Probably more expensive every year, I know. I'm kind of helping my son pay for it. So they're going to have greater expectations than the students of today on what they were doing. So I've got kind of 3 key points to kind of talk about. The first is, I believe that we should all be more connected. And that means the moment you make a decision, the moment you visit a university on an open day and think this is the place I want to go, I think we should be considering the student as part of the university. That means including them in communications, including them on stories about the university. Treat them as a student from that point on. Give them access to information, let them look at what's going to happen on their course, really kind of bring them into the fold. And then when they get here, You know, connect them to other students in groups so they can chat, because the way they talk today is by chatting online. You know, it's a sad reality that, you know, the parks are more empty in the summers today than they used to be, because kids get a better experience playing with their friends online than they do face to face. That wasn't the case 10 years ago, and if you think where that's likely to be in 10 years' time, I think that'll be significantly different. So I think we need to be more connected. And that, I mean, I absolutely agree with what you said about the app, a single app that you can find out where you're going to be studying, you can download a copy of the lecture, you can see what your assignments are, you can get your contact time, you can talk to the people in your group, and you can submit your information. And maybe even so connected so that you don't actually have to carry your laptop to make notes, because there's a tablet in front of you that just automatically connects to you because it knows you've sat in that particular seat. So I think being more connected is going to be an essential thing. The second thing is I believe it needs to be more immersive. And again, if you look at the way that kids play in terms of gaming today, it's becoming much more immersive. Now, I'm not suggesting that we gamify every subject, but maybe that's there's an opportunity there to learn from what engages kids today, what, you know, inspires them, the way that they connect, the way they're used to absorbing information today through video and immersive technologies, and use that. Now, I'm not suggesting that we all put on headsets and use VR for everything. I don't think we're quite in the world of the Matrix just yet, but there's certainly an opportunity to make a giant step towards changing the way we share information with our students. Again, and we need to be wired differently, because these kids will be wired differently in 10 years' time. And then the third point, I think it needs to be more accessible. It's great that kids come to university partly to learn, but partly for the experience. I think that's one of the reasons why I encouraged my son to go to university, was because I wanted him to get out and see the world and mix with other people. But the reality is that the way kids communicate today, they're not as disconnected from their old school friends as they used to be. In fact, he spends just as much time talking to the kids that he engaged with at secondary school and sixth form college as he does is with his university friends, because it's all online. So if that's their reality, then maybe, and again, this is where I totally agree with the idea of distance learning and recording lectures and being able to access some other locations. If the kids can't get to university, either because, you know, eventually it's too expensive, because it costs just as much to pay for your accommodation as it does for the course today. You know, that's a huge debt we're putting on the kids. Maybe there's an opportunity to say, let them study from home. Maybe even charge them differently based on the way they consume, or even by results. There's an interesting concept, isn't it? When we go to work, we get paid based on our results. We get paid based on how successful we are. Perhaps there's an opportunity to even explore that, and I appreciate there's probably a few eyes that are shoot daggers at me for saying such a thing, but maybe there's an opportunity to make it more accessible, to make it more immersive, and certainly to make it more connected. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all very much to the panel. Apart from the grumpy old man at the end.
My apologies.
One of the things we are doing at Jisc is thinking about the future. We're thinking about the implications of the fourth industrial revolution, AI, robotics, bio stuff and all that kind of thing. And one of the things that we are talking about is a vision for the future. It may not be in 5 years, it may not be in 10 years, it may take even 20 years, but often you have to lay those foundations down. You know, one of the things that we're looking at, and we're calling it Education 4.0, do a Google search, transforming teaching. How will teaching be transformed over the next 5 to 10 years? What about personalised learning? Learning that understands your context, your cohort, your location, where you are in your studies, what you are studying. So learning isn't just a linear route. Reimagining assessment. How do we do assessment in a world of essay mills? How do we do assessment in a world, whereas I think somebody, great question here, which was, how do you stop plagiarism in a world where a $10 algorithm can impersonate humans so well? You know, also, what about the estate, the campus? Andy mentioned the intelligent campus. That aspect of the kind of connection between a digital or online campus and the physical campus, where those lines are starting to be blurred. So if you've got any questions for the panel, please use the Vivox app. We will go to questions things. We've got some great questions coming in. So I'm going to I'm going to ask some questions. Sue, this directed at you. Nice view of the use of technology in 11 years' time, but who's going to pay for all that infrastructure? If you don't know, you don't have to say. But it's a good question. Who's going to pay for it?
Well, some universities are already giving students iPads. You know, that's been going on for a few years. The technology's there, Alexa's there, the things that I'm thinking about, the interactive walls is perhaps taking it, you know, a step further, but having having that device, the technology's there, it just needs to be connected. And I think, you know, what is that going to cost in 10 years' time? Who imagined that you would maybe have your own iPhone, your own iPad, your own laptop, and everybody in your family would have that as well as televisions? You know, technology prices have come down. So I would argue that it's something that's achievable. The students are paying that money. A part of that fee would accommodate that.
Okay, thank you.
Do you mind if I add a comment to that?
You can.
We're already seeing in industry that companies are adopting this technology because they want to attract and retain the best talent. They realise that these tools are essential to getting the brightest people and to getting them to stay. I believe 10 years down the line, it's going to be essential that universities have these kind of applications. Otherwise, the students will just choose to study elsewhere. So maybe it's not a case of how do you pay for it, it's a case of what happens if you don't have that kind of technology and other universities offering a similar course do. I think it will become a very important decision criteria for kids on where they study.
Anybody else want to add? Mark?
As well. I think there's already quite a number of large employers out there that are very willing to trade cash for access to the curriculum. And I think they are quite ready to provide infrastructure and funding for the best teachers and so on to create the workforce that they need. So the question might not be where's the infrastructure going to come from for engineering courses and MBAs and mathematicians and chemists, but there'll still be a question of where does the infrastructure come from for philosophy courses and medieval poet studies and paleontologists.
Caitlin, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, I think there's a tricky tension here that we need to be well aware of, is that just because we're giving students different technology devices, A, doesn't mean they know how to use them, and B, doesn't mean that course is the best course for them. So there's now kind of come the summer sort of time of year, there's universities who are offering various bits of technology for students to choose that course, and I'm less clear on whether those conversations are happening to really get into the mindset of the student to ensure that it's the right course for them. And equally how that technology will then be used when they arrive. So iPads are fantastic, but if it's not integrated in the curriculum, it's another way to access the internet, which is massively downplaying what iPads can be used for. But we need to ensure that these technologies are able to adapt to the students' learning, not just given to them to kind of retain them.
Andy?
I do agree that there's an interesting tension between what, I don't know if tension's the right word, but it seems to me there is potentially a difference in what's happening in the world of work versus what's happening in education. So if you think back, again, a bit of a history lesson to what universities were like, they were a gap between school and going into a job that probably lasted your whole life and probably wasn't that interesting, probably didn't offer you many opportunities for kind of lifelong learning and so on. The world isn't like that anymore, and workplaces are increasingly kind of flexible, digital. They're really, in my experience, really embracing digital transformation to completely change what the workplace is like. And people move around much more than they ever did before, and that probably will continue. So we want our universities and colleges to fit into that kind of approach, if you like. We're partly to do with getting people ready for that kind of approach, which is the so-called soft skills, which aren't soft at all. Of course, they're actually really important, really difficult skills, just getting on with people. But it's partly about that and partly getting to grips with how to exploit digital technology to the best to their advantage. The only other thing I'd say, just a quick thing, is that universities don't have to do everything. So I mentioned Facebook, and one of the things that students will do things by virtue of understanding digital technology much better than a lot of us do. So, for example, when my daughter went to university, her hall group, all the people on her floor in the hall she was going into, organised themselves into a Facebook group, and they got to know each other well before they went to university. They didn't ask the university to do that, and the university, as far as I'm aware, didn't get involved in doing it. It is a feature of digital technology that it empowers people to do things off their own bat.
Okay, thank you. We've got another question here. Hey, Siri, what time do I need to leave to get home? No, that wasn't. The question actually was, how does the panel see voice as an interface working in a shared environment, given it's becoming the new norm for 6-year-olds, well, somebody's at least, to interact with entertainment? So how can we deal with this kind of voice things? Amber, you look like you're about to answer.
No, I'm thinking it through.
Okay, can I go to...
No, I can.
No, you can,
yeah,
right.
I can. I think that there's more complexity in some of our provision and things like student support services than easily lend itself to scripting to be able to use AI, for example. So it might be that we see some transitional things. I've heard good examples of people using, providing student support through WhatsApp, which is a sort of bridging thing without the AI. Because actually to have the whole logical structure of how to support someone's requirements takes a huge amount of joined up thinking and scripting. Not all universities have got that sort of logical model to them yet.
Okay, anyone else want to come on voices? No? Okay, this is a question for Marc. Okay, there's a specific question, but I thought it was interesting. Marc was the only person to talk about Star Trek. No one mentioned holodecks. I was very disappointed. So the question for you, Marc, it's a very simple one. Foldable form factor in the palm on your lap, yes or no?
There are some times where I want a phone, and there are some times when I want an iPad, and if I have one that would morph into the other, that would be brilliant. What I suspect I will get is one that will morph into the other for a few hundred times and then crack down the seam, and I have to buy a new one, and that's less desirable. But I think there is something about the digital native in this move towards a morphing device. Very agile in the ways of thinking and ways of working, and needing a device that can support different modes with seconds between them, rather than, okay, I have to go and sit down at a desk where there's the right size screen for me to do this sort of task. Why won't my phone fold out 4 times and give me an A2 sheet to work on? So yeah, I'd love one if someone's shopping for Christmas gifts for Jisc staff, but I'll believe it when I see it.
Okay, we're going to go. Any questions from the floor? People who would like to talk? Anyone want to put their hand up? We've got a question there right at the top. Can you jump?
I can shout if that helps. So what do you think will happen for lectures? So I'm an associate lecturer. I've got a career outside of the university. I can see a blurring of working in industry with working at university, and I can see that blurring happening for students being apprentices as well. Do you think that the university as an institution is going to fundamentally change because of the way people work within that institution and within other workplaces?
Okay, who would like to take that first? Go on, Amber.
So I would say that we pay a lot of attention to attendance and give a lot of value to attendance and assume a lot of things about that, and that probably needs unpacking, because really it should be about participation, and that participation could come remotely or it could come afterwards. So I think the same as we try to run meetings better so that it's clear what the meeting's covering and that there's opportunities for people to have input even if they're not there, I think there is something about the lecture to rethink that it's not just about attendance, because I'm not sure that it's even proven that attendance is very closely linked to attainment, but often we assume it and then we worry about lecture recording, for example, because we think that that's going to have an impact on attainment.
Jake, do you want to come in on that one?
Going on from Amber's point, being like an interactive lecture, what I believe is that we shouldn't really have interactive lectures at all. What I mean by that is for it to be online for students to watch. I believe that lectures should be interactive there and then So rather than you paying £9,250 per semester to look at a PowerPoint slide that a teacher's prepared for you to put up on Blackboard, which really isn't helpful, make a creative environment, make a creative lecture for students to be participative, for students to be creative, and for students to learn better.
Thank you. So any more responses to the question from the person whose name I didn't get?
Well, from a slightly different perspective, there's the term for academics, so the practitioners out in, whether it's industry or wherever, you know, whether you're a journalist or someone in a hospital, having associate lecturers or guest speakers is just really, really valuable. They're busy people, you can't necessarily get them to come in, they might be international, they might be just too far away to travel. And it would be great to be able to trust the technology to say, okay, we're going to Skype you in, or whatever tool we're going to use, web conferencing, and for that to work at both ends. But there's just such a fear that it's going to fall down that we just don't do it as much as we possibly could. And, you know, making connections with industry, the more we do that, the more opportunities and relationships we can build and develop so that placement opportunities, you know, work experience, whether that's short-term, long-term, graduate jobs, that's a really important thing that we need to be considering.
Okay, someone who 10 years ago, that was me, said the VLE is dead, and now known as the Grim Reaper of EdTech, there is a question here that I quite like. Does all our conversations mean that the traditional university campus is dead? If everything is mobile and online, who needs bricks and mortar? Kalyn.
I strongly believe we still need physical learning environments, but those learning environments need to adapt to who is sat in them. So, for example, this works. There's a group of people here sat talking to you. You've turned up at a specific time for a specific purpose, but that's working now. If I asked you all to go in pairs and do a task, suddenly the noise in this room is going to erupt. That's not going to work. Please don't try it. So it's the right physical spaces for the right thing. You know, university is also about things like sport. It's about your societies. It's about learning that, yes, you really shouldn't put a knife in the toaster. And all those things that you learn as a student that you just wouldn't learn elsewhere. No, I didn't actually do it before someone beatboxes that. But university gives you the opportunity to learn things not just in a classroom, but all the other things that you learn from the experience of going to university or not going to university. You know, our apprentices learn some fantastic things in their work experience, but they're in a physical learning environment. And for me, what's really important is making sure that the physical and the virtual learning environments, whether that's VR or whether that's on a computer screen, mesh together. So right now we are physically talking to you, but this talk is being recorded so somebody else who can't be here can watch it later. And they can then tweet a question to us and we can then reply. So it's about creating scenarios where learning can take place in the right scenario for that thing.
And Ethan Sue.
So I actually have 3 kids. I've only talked about one of them. She's not my favourite, obviously. My middle lad chose not to go to university, and one of the things he and we discovered through that was that by not going to university, it is really hard to leave home. It's much harder work to leave home if you don't go to university than if you do. And I very much support Kalyn's point of view. The reason we need physical universities is as much to do with the whole experience of leaving home and having 3 years away from home doing, you know, being educated, yes, but being educated in the round, much more than just the lectures you sit in and so on, is really important, I think. And that I can't see going away. I can't see what will replace that.
Sue.
That's the ideal scenario, and I completely agree with both of you. But because there isn't accommodation paid for and grants and all the things that we might have experienced in previous years, a lot of our students are commuter students. They travel anything from an hour, 2 hours to get to university. They might be carers, they might be parents, they might be people that are redeveloping their careers, retraining and coming to university. So they've obviously got lots of commitments. So the traditional things where you would have your class time teaching and then you would go and work in groups and get on with that, you might do that in your university accommodation. That's not happening for all of our students, so we've got to have the infrastructure, the the tools so that they can actually continue those conversations and collaborate outside of the classroom. And what's happened is that we've appropriated, we as in students and staff to that degree, we've appropriated things like social media because they've given us the access to be able to chat and talk to each other. And we haven't got that tied down. So.
Okay, well, on that point, I've got a question for I'm just conscious of time. I'm going to go to the next question.
Okay.
Because, to be honest, we have loads of questions, but we haven't got loads of time. So I've got a question for Simon, actually, which links into some of that kind of conversations, which was, and I have to admit, I had to get my glasses, and I was going to get my glasses out because I couldn't quite read it. I thought it said 5G, but it actually says, with 6G access networks and campus services in the cloud, will we even need a campus network infrastructure in 2030?
100%.
Okay, fine.
100%. No,
What about you, Mark? Do you agree?
I don't think that it's a universal thing. I think the domestically available connectivity is at a level that supports a number of subject areas. I think there will always be the more science-leaning, engineering-leaning subjects where highly capable facilities are required, but a lot of subjects can be studied from home with the facilities we have now.
But do we have that connectivity at home? I'm just thinking, anyone here from Somerset? We don't have connectivity. We're lucky to have gas, to be honest.
Well, the question was around the campus network.
Yeah.
May I ask a question? How many of you are connected to Wi-Fi in here right now? How many have made notes that are automatically being uploaded to a cloud server somewhere right now? How many of you would be happy if all your communication went over a public network, even if you could get access in this particular room? And if you take out your phones, how many of you have got 4G connectivity right now? The answer is not everybody has it. It's based on the carrier you have. And 5G and 6G networks will be exactly the same because you cannot change the laws of physics, which was the Star Trek reference I've dragged in. And of course, there's also the privacy issues. Do you really want everything you've got, including intellectual property and research projects, running over public networks? And the answer is you probably don't. So for those reasons, I believe the campus network is an essential part of a university fabric to deliver all these applications and rich tools that we're talking about, and immersive technologies and VR and everything else. And that will continue for many, many years to come.
Caitlin.
To pick up on Sue's point about parity of education, I think campus networks are really important. 4G isn't across the country as it is, let alone 5G, or I didn't even know 6G was a thing, if I'm honest. But the fact that learners can attach to a reliable connection when they're on campus is so important for them doing their work. And we can, the more that network spreads, the more reliable connectivity we've got in places that might be in their home city. The Scholar program, you can go to a library in your home city if you're a commuter student, so you can still do your work and not actually be on your home campus. And the more kind of places we can integrate into these systems, the better parity of access users have, regardless whether they're on their home campus, a satellite campus, or using a different campus elsewhere that's nothing to do with their course, but they can still access the data and the systems with a reliable Wi-Fi connection.
Okay, do we have another question from the floor? Yep, over here.
Shall I shout?
Go on, shout. We're running out of time.
So 2030, it's in 11 years' time, but there are decisions that have to be made now, where it's not unreasonable to assume that they're going to have implications in 2030. So for this particular audience, what one thing would you say you should be focusing on in your decision-making or your strategies now that you believe will have that impact in 2030?
Who would like to take? Go on, Andy.
Improve the quality of your data.
Ooh, there we go. Anybody else got? Mark?
I would be looking at beefing up your training in critical thinking for students that are going to continue in a lifelong learning career and try to teach themselves outside of the groves of academe. We have a live experiment running at the moment of a large community worldwide that their mantra is do your research, and they're using the tools they have of Facebook and the web to teach themselves. You guessed who I'm talking about? The anti-vax movement. And I think if we got the critical thinking right at an earlier stage in education, people could go away and use their domestic tools to expand their knowledge without perhaps going down a cul-de-sac and incurring unpleasant consequences.
Simon.
Yeah, a lot of the initiatives and the tools we've talked about will require more bandwidth. So that's a given. But also think about the students coming through the university every single year. Your intake, your freshers, have a greater expectation of connectivity, of performance, of the environment they have than the year prior. And they come in with brand new devices they were bought for university. Every single year they've got a more powerful device than the year that went before them. So if you think what's going to happen in 10 years' time, be very careful that you don't sell yourself short in terms of underestimating what the need is going to be, because your refresh cycles on a wired network is around 10 years,
Okay.
and on a wireless network is around 5 years, so don't sell yourself short.
Amber.
I think we might need to revisit our acceptable use policies to allow faster onboarding and offboarding of users.
Okay. We've got loads of questions here. To be honest, we could probably spend another couple of hours just like, how should we use technology to enhance, or should we use it to innovate? But we've run out of time. I'd like to thank everybody on the panel. I'd like to thank Andy, Amber, Jake, Caitlin, Mark, Sue and Simon. Remember all their names. Yes, thank you. I'm going to leave you with a quote. And if I can get in there and remind myself where it is, here we go. It is unfortunately one of the chief characteristics of modern business to always be in a hurry. In olden times, it was different. That quote was written in the medical record in 1884. The future is always in the future, but I'd like to thank my panel, I'd like to thank you, the audience. Thank you all very much.